Originaire de Vancouver, Michael Christie avait fait une entrée très remarquée sur la scène littéraire avec son premier recueil de nouvelles, Le Jardin du Mendiant, paru en 2012. Il partage aujourd'hui son temps entre Victoria et Galliano Island, où il vit avec sa famille dans une maison en bois qu'il a bâtie lui-même. Traduit dans une quinzaine de langues, son roman « Lorsque le dernier arbre » a été finaliste du prestigieux Giller Prize. Il a également été récompensé par le Arthur Ellis Award for Best Novel. Les droits ont été acquis en vue d'une adaptation en série par les producteurs de Six Feet Under et Westworld.
The idea for this novel came to me when I was cutting down a tree. I live on a small island off the coast of Vancouver. It's a heavily forested island. And we built a little house out of the trees that we took down on the property. And I was clearing one of those trees away, and I cut it down, and the tree fell, and I looked at the stump, and I realized that the tree was a kind of a record. And it was a sort of a narrative map, the rings of the tree, the years of growth that were revealed. And I realized what an interesting way to tell a story about a family. And so that's what I did. I wrote a novel that spans 130 years and has the structure of the rings of a tree. So you begin in the near future in the novel and then travel back in time and then come back out to the near future again. So I suppose I was inspired by my own connection with trees and the fact that I'm a Canadian and I grew up surrounded by trees and forests. This novel is a family saga. It spans over 100 years. It tells the story of 4 generations of the Greenwood family. And every generation of the Greenwood family has something to do with trees and forests. So there's a timber tycoon, there is an environmental activist, there's a carpenter, there's a scientist who specializes in trees. So, it's the story of inheritance. It's the story of an environmental degradation that takes place over this period of time. It's the story of dysfunction, family conflict, intergenerational trauma. And it's also, hopefully, a bit of a compelling mystery as well. This book was quite challenging to write. It contains within it 5 different time periods, 1908, 1934, 1974, 2008, and 2038. So in a way, I was writing 5 books at the same time, and each time period required its own set of research, its own sort of style and mood. So, to write it, I had to do an enormous amount of reading and digging through archives to, get the details right. And then when you write a book like this that spans so much time and has all of these interrelations between the time periods, you end up having to do a lot of editing and fixing and fiddling with how all of the stories fit together. Since this novel contains something that is known as the Great Withering, which takes place in the future section, which is a phenomenon where the vast majority of the Earth's trees begin to die because of the shifting climate. People have labeled this book climate fiction. They've called it dystopian fiction, which I struggle with. I think because where I live on this island, there is a tree known as the Western red cedar, which is a gigantic, beautiful, tall evergreen tree, hundreds of feet tall at times, that indigenous people have been using for various purposes for millennia. And those trees are dying now due to repeated drought stress. It's just too dry for them to survive, though they've lived for hundreds and hundreds of years up until this point. And so the dystopian or the science fiction aspect of this story really isn't that far-fetched at all, not for me. And it didn't require much imagination to carry this climate effect forward. So, I mean, I think, while the best that a fiction writer can do is to bring some emotion to a particular idea, like climate change. I'm, certainly not going to convince someone who does not believe that climate change is man-made, that is the case, that I'm not going to be able to do that. But I do think that a fiction writer's role can be to make a topic emotional and experienceable for a reader, to sort of reawaken readers to the threat of a particular kind. And, I think climate change is the greatest threat that humanity has ever faced.